Well, for many of you who've gone for a drive or a walk in the French countryside, getting lost on a road or a path with no name is actually pretty common. But the French government is now trying to get smaller towns to change that and give those places a name. We're going to talk more about this with Solange Mougin, who joins me in the studio. Hi, Solange.
Hi, Jeannie.
So giving a name to these places or these roads is a little more complicated than it seems. And it also seems that there's a deadline that's approaching to establish these addresses.
Yeah, there are just 2 days left for small French towns that have less than 2,000 residents, and there are 35,000 of them, for them to make sure that they have names on all their roads, homes and places in their village. They all have a specific address. Now, this move is part of a law called the 3D legislation, and it was passed in 2022. It's named the 3D because of it's called the Differentiation, Decentralization, and Deconcentration and Simplification Law. And its goal is essentially to simplify the work of town halls across France. But one element of this law, the giving of addresses and road names to hundreds of thousands of places, well, it's proving to be a huge undertaking. Bigger towns had until January 1st, and now these smaller towns have until Saturday, June 1st, to abide by the law. Before the law, there were more than 350,000 roads and routes in France that did not have an official name. Just 15% of small towns had done this for all addresses. Now, today, the changes concern nearly 2 million French people who will now have a new or a different address. For example, in the town of Marcoles in central France, there are less than 600 residents, but there are hundreds of names that needed to be given.
We're establishing between 400 and 450 addresses in the town of Marcoles, which is a lot. So it would be surprising if there aren't ones we forget, make mistakes on, or double up. Things like that.
So, Solange, why does the government want these places in France to have specific addresses? And what will happen if they don't?
Well, luckily and hopefully, nothing will happen for now for these town halls, as there are some 200,000 roads that haven't been named yet. Just over half of these towns have done so, but the other half have not. There are no fines currently if the town does not name every route. But that said, once the law goes into effect June 1st, if the municipality hasn't done it, then it could be liable for damages if the lack of an address causes, for example, firefighters or ambulances to lose their way and not to get to a fire or an ill person because they got lost. So small towns, but also cities before them, well, they've been working for years to name, or some of them have been working for years to name everything. In some places, like in the southwest city of Sala, the city asked locals what they wanted for their unnamed streets.
On social media, the name that came out on top was Simone Weil, Simone de Beauvoir and Josephine Baker, but also more original names like Truffle Street or Foie Gras Road, because we're in the capital of gastronomy. The added value is clear in regard to tourism to use GPS location tracking. It's also the case for first responders. You have to think about how it will be easier for them to find out where they need to be. And finally, it will help mail services with letters and packages.
As we just heard, there are many reasons to create established road names and addresses. Many homes are actually given large numbers of their addresses, and this actually refers to the meters from the start of the road. This is for future urbanization and also to help first responders know the distance. So there is this safety aspect. There's also high-speed internet cables. They require specific address tags. GPS systems also use them, as do postal and delivery personnel.
All right, so there's a lot of arguments as to why these address changes and these new names are a good thing, but the law has still created quite a bit of an uproar.
Well, there's the question of what to name these roads and paths. Sometimes it works out well in a sort of collegial manner with towns picking specific names, either that already existed by word of mouth or are in the history of the place, or are picking new ones that have a specific local significance. Those choices have solidified the history of these places.
People like narratives, not lies, stories. It can help younger generations who feel lost to understand their history. As we say in the north in Ch'ti, if you don't know where you come from, you can't know where to go.
However, as Jeannie was referring to it, there has been a lot of pushback as well, because sometimes the changes have not taken into account regional specificities and regional languages, or the choices have actually been outsourced because doing the research and naming things, well, it costs money and time. Many hamlets, or lieux-dits as we call them in French, well, they've been called by a specific name for hundreds of years, and then they were suddenly changed into something else entirely. In Alsace, where there's a strong regional sentiment, there's been pushback about naming streets in French versus Alsatian. In Brittany also, an association has even called on UNESCO to help save these lieux-dits or these hamlet names, which they argue have been given names in French and not in the traditional Breton. So there are many people in French villages who fear that these changes and this standardization, well, that it's chipping away from their local history and their regional specificities.
All right, Solange, that's fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for that look at that new law that's going to make addresses necessary here in France. Thank you very much. Thanks to Solange, and thanks to you for watching. Don't go away. I'll be back at the top of the hour with more headlines.